Hello. For this first assignment, you're really going to be focusing not only on the composition lecture that you went through first, where you're really looking at all the different ways that composition and framing can impact the overall photograph, but you're also going to be focusing on color and color relationship. So it's both. Um, to start, one of the images you'll be coming up with is a warm color. So a warm color relationship in your photograph is going to be where most of the photograph is going to show this particular color relationship. Now, warm colors are colors that are on this side of the color wheel. So reds, oranges, yellows, maybe yellowy greens, magentas. Most of your composition should really focus on demonstrating that color relationship. So as you do that and you kind of go through color, these color relationships, any other color that you have in here that's not a warm color is going to distract from that effect. So make sure when you're framing that you're excluding any other color relationships from your image. Now, cool colors are colors that are on the opposite side of the color wheel. So purples, blues, greens, kind of yellowy greens can be used also here. These tend to have a more soothing visual effect on the viewer. They kind of recede visually. So when you're coming up with your cool color palette in your image, again, try to exclude any warm tones that might, come in your composition because they will visually distract from the effect you're trying to create. Complementary colors are colors that are exact opposites on the color wheel, and they're going to have the most dramatic effect in terms of color contrast. So one thing you might notice is each of these images, if it was in a black and white composition, would be a very low contrast image. But the color in the photograph is what's creating the dynamic color relationship. It's creating the most amount of contrast. So reds and greens would be complementary colors. Purples and yellows, blues and oranges. So when you're coming up with your complementary color relationship, kind of keep those in mind. If you need to, keep this lecture with you, kind of refer to it when you're shooting, just to make sure you're covering that and that your relationship that you're showing for color is truly complementary and not just contrasting. So contrasting colors that are just kind of generally opposing each other on the color wheel, but not color opposites. And they do have contrast, but it's a little bit less than you'll see with complementary colors. Now, analogous colors, these are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. I'm not looking for you to create a gradient or something. I'm looking for you to demonstrate how those colors work together. They tend to have a harmonious visual effect when you put colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, like blues and greens together, oranges and reds, right? Yellows and greens. This color relationship tends to be a little bit, soothing. And when you're coming up with this color combination, my advice is keep it simple. Avoid a really cluttered composition and focus on the color relationship you're trying to show. So with color contrast, you can create contrast in a number of different ways, right? If you've taken a black and white photography class, you sort of trained yourself to come up with contrast through lighting, right? Through balances of lights and darks in your image, knowing that the color relationship wasn't going to be something that you could use. So now you kind of have to go back and retrain your eye to look at color combinations and color relationships to create contrast or to avoid contrast, depending on the effect you're trying to create. So you are going to be doing that through color, but you're also going to be doing it through light. So keep in mind the lighting effects you were using in black and white, but try to figure out what particular, contrast you want in your photographs through color as well. Now, when you isolate colors, you're looking for a small area of contrasting or complementary color in an otherwise kind of neutral or analogous field of color. So this is used best when it's not right in the center and when it's a little bit small, right? When you're drawing attention to something that you maybe wouldn't otherwise see or notice. So this is a good example, how this green shirt becomes a spot. Your eye goes right to it in the composition. So with any of these, right, notice that they're not dead center in the frame. You're really still looking at the effects we were looking at in terms of composition, right, and avoid centered framing. You're looking at kind of putting things in usually one of the third top, or bottom areas of the photograph. So your eye can come to it, but you're looking around the rest of the frame. So again, look at how differently these images work as black and white compositions. Much of the contrast came from color contrast rather than from tone. And the things that worked as spots aren't working as well or strategically now. So in summary, right, you're looking at isolating color, you're looking at creating warm and cool compositions, you're looking at creating complementary color relationships. And again, when you're doing all of this sort of work and trying to figure out, contrast and color relationships, just make sure that you cover each of these general effects when you're shooting. You need one image that's analogous, one image that's complementary, one image that's showing isolated color, one image showing a warm color palette, and one image showing a cool color palette. So you're going to be shooting in primarily automatic mode. This is the very first assignment in a beginning photo course. I'm not expecting you to know manual exposure yet, but if you've taken a photo class before and you're already totally familiar with manual exposure, that's fine. You can shoot in M mode, AV mode, TV mode. I'm not looking at your shooting mode, for grading or anything in this assignment. You can shoot in any of the modes that you would like. But again, if you are shooting in manual mode, just make sure you have good exposures that you're showing. Try a lot of different points of view, right? Move close up and farther away. Try shooting from different positions, perspective, and camera angles. So this assignment is, again, half about color and the other half is composition and all the things that go into composition. So you really want to carefully consider your composition in your framing. Consider line, form, contrast, pattern, etc., right? So think about what areas you want to include or exclude and pay very careful attention to the background, what appears in the background of your image. So when you're shooting, again, try to avoid shooting at just a normal, standard human view, right? Really try moving your body around, getting lower and higher, trying different points of view to see what works best. Sometimes you'll be surprised at what point of view or distance from your subject works visually and what doesn't. Avoid centered compositions. I don't want to see any images where your subject is right in the center of the frame. Centered compositions can work well for certain kinds of images, but we're going to try to avoid that for the most part in this class because it's about retraining your eye to use different kinds of compositional techniques. People tend to learn when they're starting photography, just centering something right in the frame because it's the most obvious. You know that's your subject, you put it right in the middle. But it usually doesn't work as well as other kinds of compositional, arrangements you could come up with. So again, really be very careful looking at the foreground as well as the background of your scene. Make sure everything you want to have in your photographs is exactly where you want it. So we're really looking at not only the color relationships that we've talked about in this assignment, but also your compositional technique, right? So, you don't need to shoot hundreds and hundreds of photographs for this, but I really want to see these very careful, deliberate compositional and color relationships that we've discussed so far. Make sure your image is in focus, right? So if you're having trouble using manual focus, don't worry about it. You are absolutely welcome to use autofocus in this course. And remember the locking focus technique that I went over a little bit in that first slide lecture. Use a variety of backgrounds and lighting situations. Find locations, backgrounds, and lighting that you like, that seem interesting. Try both indoor and outdoor shooting. So experiment. Challenge yourself to use unconventional subjects, point of view, and compositions, right? Considering all those elements in your frame. You're shooting digital for the most part in this course, so you're not going to have to worry about the costs of film or excessive shooting. If you don't like something, just delete it. So really, experimenting and trying different points of view is the easiest way to make your photographs more visually engaging. So just a couple notes. All images turned in this semester for all assignments must be new and original photographs shot by you for the assignment. No previous work will be accepted because it's really about, doing the best you can to learn new techniques. Don't do any post-processing, cropping, or adjustment on this assignment. On later assignments you can, but on this one, this is really about getting things set up and framed the best you can in your camera without relying on post-process to, fix mistakes. Do have your camera's date and time set correctly if you're shooting a digital camera. You want to do this before you start shooting. Otherwise, it can just be really confusing later for determining when it's shot. And I'm also looking at the date timestamp to make sure that it was, correctly done and for the assignment. So you're going to turn in only unaltered JPEG files here, large JPEG files. I want to be able to see the metadata in order for you to receive credit. If you're used to RAW shooting and you prefer to shoot camera raw, that's absolutely fine with me. Just make sure for at least this one that you're shooting in a RAW plus JPEG mode, so you also have a JPEG available, or that you're using software that is capable of maintaining the metadata and doesn't destroy it, right? So you can do that through Adobe Camera Raw, through Adobe Lightroom. A couple other programs will allow you to maintain that information. For this first assignment only, if you don't have a DSLR or equivalent mirrorless camera yet, you can use a compact camera, just no cell phone cameras, right? It has to be something designed primarily as a camera. If you only have your cell phone right now and you haven't acquired a camera yet and you can't, borrow one or check one out for whatever reason, if you can use your iPhone or camera phone images only as a placeholder. I won't grade them or evaluate them. It'll just make sure that you have the ability to turn something else in later. But for full credit, I do need to have images shot with a compact camera that has, a range of focuses that allows you to do some of the more general manual controls. So if you have any questions about the assignment, feel free to contact me. I'm available most easily by email. And I look forward to hearing with you and seeing your work.